Ahoy, and welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself some tea, and let's get started. Today we are going to be looking over some books that I enjoy and have yet to find an excuse to talk about. So I found that excuse today. We're going to talk about them. Let's get into it. Okay, so first up is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. Apologies. This is an adult historical fiction. It is set during World War II, and it follows two protagonists. The first one is Maggie, who is a blind Parisian girl whose father works for the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And they both flee Nazi-occupied Paris when Maggie is 12 years old, I think. They go to stay with Maggie-Law's uncle in Saint-Malo. And unbeknownst to Maggie, her father carries with him a priceless and dangerous secret. The other protagonist is Werner, an orphan German boy living in an orphanage with his sister, his younger sister. And he is a prodigy at making and repairing radios. So, of course, he gets enlisted. He gets enlisted to this unit who specializes in tracking down resistance members. And the story follows their paths and how they intertwine. This book is just so beautifully written. In film, there's a phrase that's every frame a painting. For this book, it's every sentence a painting. It's just stunning. I can't praise it enough. That being said, the book is set in World War II, and there's obviously a lot of horrific things going on that not even the most beautiful writing can cover up. This book left images in my brain that I thought about over and over again afterwards. There are just some impossible decisions that these characters have to make that really made me question what I would do in those situations. My two faults for this book, I only have two. One is that Maggie is kind of a faultless character. She's kind of a little bit too perfect. And the other one is that there is a scene towards the end that contains SA, and it kind of came out of nowhere. And it's not graphic, but it really shook me to my core. And every time I reread this book, I just skip that page. But other than that, the story is really thought-provoking and really emotional, and the writing is so beautiful. So yeah, would definitely recommend checking it out. Next up is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is an adult literary / science fiction. It often gets marketed as a science fiction, but when you market a book as science fiction, you have expectations, and if you go into this thinking that is a pure science fiction, you will be either very confused or very disappointed. I was very confused. I thought it was like a science fiction, and it technically is, but it's more of a literary fiction with science fiction elements. It is not focused on the science fiction elements at all. It's just kind of in the background. So be aware. This follows Kathy, who is a schoolgirl at Hailsham, which is an English boarding school where the students study art and literature, but are allowed very little contact with the outside world. Kathy grows up in Hailsham with her friends Ruth and Tommy until it is time for them to leave and fulfill their ultimate purpose. And that's kind of as much as I want to say about that. This book is very haunting. It kind of never lets you go. It's another one that leaves you thinking about it long after you've finished it. And what I love about Ishiguro's writing is that he doesn't explain everything to you. He gives you enough to get by, but he doesn't take you by the hand and guide you through it. He just kind of gives you something and then lets you figure it out for yourself. and kind of lets you piece things together by yourself, which I really like. It kind of leaves some things open to interpretation without the whole thing feeling really pointless because nothing was established. This book is a lot of things. It is a literary fiction. It's a mystery, sort of. It's a love story, sort of. It's a character study, sort of. It's an existential horror, sort of. Or maybe that's just me. So yeah, all in all, I just really enjoyed this book and I thoroughly recommend it. Next up is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This is an adult high fantasy, I think is what it would be. I do kind of get my fantasies confused. I know, but we can't all be perfect, okay? The gist of it is that this is a story of two sister princesses. The god king, one of them has to marry the lesser god who doesn't like his job, and the immortal who's still trying to undo the mistakes he made hundreds of years ago. And yes, I did steal that directly off of Goodreads. I thought it was a perfect summary of it. I have zero regret. The world in this book is really cool, as most Brandon Sanderson worlds are. He's very good at world building. In this world, those who die in glory or have some sort of like significant reasoning behind their death have the possibility of returning to life as gods. These gods live in a pantheon in the capital city of this world. And everyone in this world has something that's called biochroma, or breath, which is essentially their life force. But by amassing a lot of breaths, you can draw on the colors of objects, and in doing that, you can essentially do a bunch of magical stuff. I find this book a really nice balance between plot and character. There definitely is a plot, but it's a very character-driven plot. So I think it's a nice something for everybody. It is fast-paced without being breakneck quick, and things are happening, and the characters are all really interesting, and the mysteries are just so well built up, and like there's so much tension around them. It's not a perfect book, and it's not my favorite Sanderson book. That goes to Mistborn and the Stormlight Archives, but I still think it is truly enjoyable, and I would definitely encourage any fantasy lover to read it. Next is the only book on this list that I don't own, so I'll just be holding my Star Trek mug. It is An Unkindness of Magicians by Kat Howard. In this world's version of New York, there's a secret magical society living in plain sight called the Unseen World. But the Unseen World is in a bit of a turmoil at the moment, because not only is it the Turning, which is a magical tournament that determines which house will lead the magical underground. So not only is that happening, but magic is beginning to fail and nobody knows why. So when a completely unknown magician named Sydney arrives wielding incredible power, everyone hopes that she will be able to fix the magic and save their society. The thing is that Sydney hasn't come to fix the system, she's come to destroy it. Nice. This book is just a lot of fun to read. It does kind of throw you in the thick of things with little to no explanation and just expects you to catch up. So you do spend a sizable portion not really knowing what's going on. But once you figure it out, it's a wild ride. It has some really interesting characters. I keep using the word interesting. It's my go-to word. I really need a thesaurus. But anyway, I really like the characters. And the ending was so good. And there's some like really cool magic stuff. They never fully explain the magic stuff, but they give you just enough to know, to like, for you to go like, oh, that was cool. More of that, please. And there's a sequel coming out, so maybe there will be more of that. The last one on the list is the Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. And this is a YA paranormal fantasy. This takes place on a fictional island off the coast of Ireland, I believe. And this island is famous for the Kapelushka, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, which are carnivorous water horses, very similar to Kelpies, if you've heard of Kelpies or are familiar with Kelpies, and Kelpies is also a lot easier to say. Anyway, the Kapelushka are very dangerous. They are predators, and they are far, far more difficult to manage than land horses. But every year on November 1st, there are the Scorpio races, where riders attempt to keep hold of their mounts until they reach the finish line, and most don't. The races are notorious for being incredibly dangerous and lethal. Each year there are several casualties. And our main character, Puck Connolly, never intended to run in the races, but life has left her with very little choice. So she ends up being the first girl to ever enter in the tournament, or in the race. The first girl to ever enter in the races. Tournament was from the last book. So I didn't expect to like this book nearly as much as I did, especially after rereading it again as an adult. But it really held up. And here we are. I love the writing. It can get a little, I guess, dramatic at times, but it really sets the tone. It's really good at creating an atmosphere, and like you can feel the like loneliness and the kind of ruggedness of this island, and how everyone, like, there are so little people on this island that they kind of have to band together, but they don't always like each other. So that causes some conflict. But yeah, and there's just like, this island is so brutal, but it's also so beautiful, and the writing really reflects that. Once you look past some of the teenage angst, the characters are also really fascinating. Our two main ones are Puck Connolly and Sean Kendrick, and Sean is the returning champion of the races. He's very much the typical like strong and silent type, but as you learn more about him and hear more of his backstory, he really comes into his own, and I do really like him as a character. Puck, the first time reading this, I didn't like her as much. She has one of those like abrasive personalities that I like to refer to, but she does have a pretty good reason for acting the way she does. Yeah, there are a lot of layers to her, so I find her really interesting. I will say that this book is very character focused. The main plot is getting ready for the races, and the races happen at the end of the book. So it's a lot of these two characters just kind of living their daily lives and training. And I think it's really interesting, and I'm here for it because I love character-driven stories. But if you are more of a plot reader, you might not enjoy this as much. But for everyone else, highly recommend it. And that's it. Those are all the books on the list for today. I only wanted to look at 5, so I guess I'm hoping to find lists that the other ones belong onto, but there are definitely more books that I enjoy that I haven't talked about yet. I've got a whole bookshelf full of them. So yeah, let me know what you thought about them down in the comments. Let me know if you read any of them and what you thought of them, if you'd like to read some of them. If you want to talk more about them, I'm always open to it. You can find me on Instagram at Leia Like the Princess, where you can also find my little embroidery and sewing and art store, Moonlit Cat Creations, or you can go directly to the website at moonlitcatcreations.com. And until next time, stay cozy.